Well, hello, everybody. I usually say happy Friday because this is usually my Friday chat. So if you catch up on Friday, awesome. But this issue couldn't wait. Couldn't wait as well because it's a busy week. And next week is the Global Privacy Assembly. For those of you who are zipping over there, please join FPF at a number of the events, panels, and inside events in the lovely Isle, or bailiwick, I guess is the proper way to refer it, of Jersey. But I'm joined today by an issue that I think most of us experience in one way or another. But I think whether or not that's just life, we all work hard and need a little more time to breathe, or whether we're actually officially thinking about this in a much more structured way as something that we need to grapple with for our ability to perform well, for our mental health, I think is a whole nother ball of wax, as Doug might say. Doug Miller, colleague of mine for many years. We first met when we worked together at AOL. Doug, after a number of years at AOL, became the chief privacy officer there, became the privacy lead when AOL and Yahoo converged. And then, of course, Verizon put together a thing called Oath. And Doug played a lead there. Doug, until recently, had a senior role in ads-related privacy at Amazon. And now that he has a new role in the world, helping counsel, I'll let him tell a little bit more about that, but folks who, in the general corporate business world, or particularly those who maybe live in this strange world we all live in, this intersection of tech policy and new laws and data protection, and trying to figure out both how to give smart advice to colleagues, to businesses, to regulators, while keeping up with this just onslaught of new laws, of new issues, of media interest. It's a incredibly pressurized environment now for people who work in AI, for people who work in data protection. And we hear lots of people talking about burnout. And so as an executive coach, Doug brings both an understanding of, my world, your world, what it means to work in law, what it means to work at a big company, what it means to work in data protection and compliance, where you're constantly, trying to persuade, trying to make hard judgment calls, and the stress of giving the wrong advice means that your company is critiqued and sued. But giving the too conservative advice means everyone else goes ahead and succeeds, and the business people think you're ridiculous and don't get it, or you're a Luddite because you were holding up something key and critical. And sometimes you were right to, and you can say, I told you so years later, and sometimes you're not. And so the pressures are challenging. So really happy that Doug, who, in addition to his executive coaching, is helping lead our EdTech group. So those of you who live and breathe the challenges of EdTech and the particular challenges that world appreciates, will appreciate his two hats. Jordan Wrigley is a member of the FPF team who focuses on health issues. We have an incredible health group. We got pharma companies. We got health data companies. We've got pharmacies and online pharmacies and medical device folks and big tech companies who are evidently all healthcare companies. And of course, you're all health companies, because the definitions of sensitive data can be so vast that it's hard to imagine what data cannot be used to infer health information about us. And so Jordan leads that, but has a background as a researcher and has been doing work on this particular issue. So I'm going to start with this. Our topic is burnout. And so what are we talking about? I mean, I work really hard. I don't think I'm burnt out. I grew up at a time where, in my early days, people paid me to be a lawyer. Partners yelled at me. I got smarter. I worked harder. I had a thick skin. It was part of the deal that you had a lot of pressure and you wanted to make partner or, do well. If you talked about burnout at your law firm, you'd be burnt right out of there pretty quickly. What are we talking about when we talk about burnout? Isn't that just the way of the world? You want to succeed? Who's become a top executive or a great leader of a not-for-profit without working incredibly hard, burning the candle to get there? Why should we worry about burnout? Isn't that just is some Gen whatever we're up to today thing where everybody's worried about their mental health and not coming into the office and not working hard?
That's quite the setup, Jules. And I think a lot of people would love for hard work, recognition and value to just be the inescapable outcome of hard work. I think there was a quote a while back that if that were so, if recognition, wealth, and value were the inescapable outcome of hard work, every woman in Africa and India would be a billionaire CEO. And I kind of love that thought, and it makes a lot of sense to me. In terms of this new world of burnout we're in, one of the things that's happened and happened in 2019 is we now have a medical diagnosis of burnout. It is now medically recognized as a symptom, specifically a syndrome rather, where there is a series of symptoms, but specifically not as a condition, rather it's a occupational phenomenon. So this new diagnosis specifically focuses on the workplace, though we might throw burnout as a term around in other spaces as well. So in particular, it's been described by Dr. Christine Sinsky, who is an MD and vice president of American Medical Association, as related to the environment in which one works. And as such, there's a mismatch typically associated between workload and the resources needed to do the work in a meaningful way. And the diagnosis of burnout, if one is to be diagnosed with burnout, consists of three dimensions. Feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, long-term and often chronic, increased medical distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism about one's job, and three, a sense of ineffectiveness or lack of accomplishment. All of these together can open up one to a diagnosis of burnout. And yes, absolutely, working hard, we always want that result to be recognition of that hard work. And so there's also symptoms associated now with this diagnosis, which include extreme exhaustion, lethargy, things like cognitive disturbance or inability to focus. We call it brain fog sometimes now. Loss of feeling inside and outside of work, where it just feels numb or unempathetic or unable to connect with others. Insularity or isolation, which is really frustrating when one is trying to connect and make the work meaningful, and then compromised work performance. All of these are super challenging. And one of the other things that's super challenging, we tend to use the word self-care a lot, as coined by Audre Lorde. And it's become a little divorced from the way she originally described it, which includes a community of care around individuals, teams, teamwork, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, Dr. Sinsky also is quoted as saying, the focus needs to be on the workplace and not the worker, because individually, there's only so much we can do for ourselves when the environment we are in is not feeding us, nurturing us, growing us, helping us thrive. And so there needs to be a focus on environmentally related stressors rather than the weakness perceived in individuals. Things like mindfulness and practices, meditation, have been shown to help to some extent, but often it's only prolonging the inevitable end of burnout. And of course, I always want to acknowledge that burnout affects and impacts people differently. Burnout rates are incredibly high in young Black and Brown women in particular, across occupations. That's a very common theme. And of course, LGBTQIA individuals and disabled individuals, chronically ill individuals, any marginalized group is going to experience burnout at a far higher rate, both medically and in the more common colloquial use of the word. So I'm very excited to hear Doug speak. I hope he's got solutions for us, because this is a really big problem we're facing, I think, across all occupations. But I have been learning more and more about the uniqueness of the privacy space and burnout in it.
Yeah, well, Doug Jordan specifically flagged things like, working very hard, not having enough resources, and maybe not, feeling a sense of accomplishment, not feeling a sense of teamwork. That describes the life of lots of people in privacy. There's nobody who feels, even at the biggest companies, given the vast amount of what's going on, that they've got enough resource, and nobody gets everything they ask for or want in terms of cooperation, and nobody feels 100% compliant with any state law. I mean, that sounds like it's recipe for burnout.
Oh, it certainly is. As she was talking, I had the Roberta Flack tune "Killing Me Softly" with his song going through my mind. I'm interested in helping privacy teams and privacy professionals be more effective and fulfilled. And what we find is one of the main reasons people leave privacy teams is because of burnout. And privacy teams are being asked to do more, and they're often not able to work at full capacity, by which I mean doing their best possible work. And I am terribly interested in this IAPP report about organizational digital governance, where they're talking about digital entropy, this condition of disorder and uncertainty, which is a state in which we as privacy professionals live. So as I've been unpacking the concepts of burnout, I'm interested in where can we find small gains in order and certainty. So Jordan talked about the three main elements of burnout that have been identified: exhaustion, feeling ineffective, and then that cynicism. I've tried to unpack those a little bit more in ways that I think uniquely affect people in our profession. So let me elaborate on that. I mean, the exhaustion, I think Jordan covered that. But first of all, in the ineffective realm, we certainly feel overwhelmed. There's 7,538 state privacy laws. All of the AI stuff is coming along. There's always new guidance in Europe and other laws around the world. It's impossible to keep up. You got to learn all these new technologies. Just keeping up with the basic knowledge is a lot. You are inundated. When I think about that, I think about cities that are sinking, that are inundated by water. Where do the Dutch put all that water? I think about the wharf here in Washington, D.C. when it was built, where they know how high the water will rise in a 100-year flood. So they built the buildings back a little bit farther. They raised them up a little bit, but they built all of these permeable surfaces where there's more absorption of the inundation, and then it gets rechanneled into a cistern underneath for reuse as flushing watering plants or whatever. So I think that metaphor is powerful to think about. One, how can you reshape your structures and institutions to better plan for the influx? Two, how can you think about sort of absorbing and rechanneling that work? And I think that's getting very creative in your organization. That IAPP report, where they're talking about the privacy profession is changing, and it's privacy and AI, privacy and compliance, privacy and ethics. What an opportunity to reframe. Because just the way they're talking about it starts to break down the silos. And in our organizations, I think we can seize the moment and start suggesting that there are ways that we can absorb more work by involving more people, channeling it to different places, that sort of thing. So that's one aspect of just the overwhelmed. One of the ways that we're overwhelmed is being distracted. Partly by our devices, but partly by our workplaces, meetings that are entirely unnecessary, lots of work about work, reports and updates and things like that. Offices that are noisy because we have to sit out in the open now. Remember that halcyon time, 10 years ago when people had their own office and you could shut a door. And if you're in the privacy, you need to be able to have a quiet conversation to dive deep with people. And then sometimes you need to be able to collaborate with people. And the offices need to provide the ability for everybody to do this work. And it's possible to be not exhausted and maybe not even overwhelmed and not terribly distracted, but you can still feel very, very frustrated in your workplace. Blockers that are just keeping you, even if you feel like you're doing a good job, from making the progress that you need to make. And all of these things will pile up into feeling ineffective. But I think one of the places where there's opportunities for leaders to make a change is in the part where people feel cynical. And there's an awful lot of literature about how we should avoid being cynical in the workplace. I can attest that there was a time in my career where I may have been a Mr. Grumpy Pants myself, and the work that I've done over time has been to overcome feeling cynical. But that has to do with a few things that I think are unique to being a privacy professional. One is a lot of times we value privacy as privacy professionals, and yet we work in organizations that appear to value privacy less than we do. So that sets up a clash right there. But there's also the issue of Are we clear about what we're doing? What is our big purpose? I ardently believe that good strategic planning, properly communicated, can help people mitigate burnout because it provides the clarity. You provide clarity, it starts to reduce uncertainty, it reduces frustration, it starts to create order. So I think there's a lot of things that leaders can do for these different elements of burnout that can rethink and reinvent the organization so that the team can do its best work.
Well, how much is this? I mean, I feel like as a manager and somebody who makes, budget and personnel decisions, I feel like the answer always is, well, just hire more people so that the work can be done better. But it doesn't ever seem to solve the problem, and you can't always keep hiring more people. So what are the things we've tried to give more time off, but that doesn't make the work less. It makes people maybe busier, but I guess they get a little bit of time off, and you try to pay people well so they feel that they're adequately compensated. But are there strategies that don't involve spending a lot more money or giving a lot more vacation? We're all in a very competitive, fast-paced environment. Obviously, organizations being well managed is important for a lot of reasons. But if you're managing as well as you can, you're not necessarily suddenly going to have a better overall managed organization. What are the things? So we talked about making sure people have quiet spaces at work, and so that's clearly something perhaps we can all do more of. There is a bit of a backlash against the big open mosh pit, or at least making sure there are available spaces in addition to the open spaces. But as a manager, what would you tell me? We hear from our staff that they feel burnt out. Other than paying well, time off, quiet spaces, managing as well as you can manage, what are the other things one can do? It does seem like there's some employees who just thrive even if the situation is as it is, but then there are others, who say they're burnt out. So are there other tactics that a manager can bring to the table, or that an employee can take grip of on their own and ask for, or put in place?
Well, a couple points. First of all, on the resources thing, I agree. There's probably not a privacy team anywhere that doesn't need more resources, and that goes for organizations, and it probably goes for regulators too. But I also think that if your resources doubled tomorrow, you would still have a lot of these problems of how to be clear about what you're doing, how to work effectively, how to make decisions fast enough. A lot of times people are just frustrated because it takes too long to make a decision. We can get creative and better at setting up the right decision mechanisms in our organization to either push decision making down to people who are empowered and feel more autonomy in making those decisions, or pushing them up to a place where they're centralized, but they're getting made faster so that the organization can move along. I think that when there is clarity around purpose and direction, that helps. I think creating networks of leadership teams across the organization is vitally important. When you look at all the literature about leadership these days, the whole command and control top-down model is pretty much obsolete. What we talk about now, Stanley McChrystal is big on this, the leading from the middle, and learning to lead across teams. This requires a really strong communication. And I think that a lot of organizations do not communicate what they're doing and why this is important as well as they possibly could. And final point, we often talk about employee development in terms of the additional knowledge and skills that people can provide. I think we could start talking about it more in terms of growth, a more vertical development, the capacity to reflect on how we work, to think more strategically, to learn to lead across teams. And those, we call them soft skills, but they're really the essential skills that we need, especially in the privacy business, where we have to work with so many different kinds of stakeholders. If we can help people just a little bit, it makes the world of difference. team morale is so terribly fragile. And somebody who is spiraling into cynicism, it takes, a couple of weeks of you're trying to do something, you can't move it forward, and it's human nature to just say, well, the hell with it, I'm not going to bother anymore. If they don't care, I'm not going to care. And that instantly starts to spiral down. So as leaders, we have to pay as much attention to the nuance of the people on our team to arrest that spiral and get it moving in the other direction.
Sure, and you talked about the fact that there's a medical diagnosis. So there's a medical diagnosis. Is the answer medicines and therapy? I mean, if I went to the doctor or I went to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and they said, I diagnose you with burnout, what prescription or what directions would they give me? Go to another company that is better managed?
Oh, that's a great question, Jules. So one of the hard parts about this being an occupational phenomenon and not a condition per se is there's not too many medical interventions available. So there can be subsequent illnesses or conditions associated with burnout, especially when it becomes chronic burnout, things like depression and anxiety disorders, inflammation in the physiological body, just a tremendous onslaught of issues that can cascade. And unfortunately, yes, one of the things that doctors may respond with or providers may respond with is take a break, take time away, consider if you want to stay in this environment or perhaps find a different environment. And that's often the best they can offer. I love what Doug was saying too about the nuance of people, because one of the things, of course, a provider will take into account these days is the whole person. I think that's something really valuable managers can do as well here. The stressors for, say, a new parent or a parent with infants or toddlers will be quite different than someone who doesn't have infants or toddlers around them. For example, in really time-sensitive projects where maybe you do need to put in like a 10-hour a day to get that thing done and get it done well, the challenges of having to stop in the middle of it and go pick up kids from school, it's really hard. So one of the things I really value as a manager and being able to do as a manager, as well as having done for me as someone who is managed, is when a person or a manager who is overseeing me sees those barriers and that I want to do that work. I want to do it well. I want to commit the time and put in the hard work, but that there are just certain responsibilities I may have as either a parent or as a caregiver that prevent that. And so one thing I've seen some companies doing is offering additional just-in-time funding or childcare so that when a project comes up and we can get that extra time off and know that our kids are taken care of, we can do the work and it's there and we're there to do it. So one of the key things about the medical diagnosis, of course, is that we just can't have it happen or have a provider look at us and diagnose us with burnout without considering those sorts of details and other things that may be stacking to create burnout at multiple levels, which of course affects every aspect of life, including our occupation and employment.
Bruna Godoy in the comments flags the AI governance being absorbed into privacy teams who are already short-staffed. And I'll just add that in many of our conversations with chief privacy officers and the like, many of whom have an AI title now or play a big role in AI, my question to many of them has been, awesome, you got it in the title. Did you get new staff? Did you get new budget? And most significantly, the answer is no, they didn't. So indeed, we may be heading for quite a crescendo of stress going forward. One point that she flags, though, is that assistance in prioritization from top down is an important piece to avoid this. And it resonates me in a way in that occasionally when I've talked to staff who felt burnt out, I said, well, tell me what you're doing, because from where I sit, you don't seem that busy. I seem busier than you, right? And then I sort of see they're doing a bunch of stuff that different people gave them or told them or that they think are needed. And I'm like, well, these are the two things that really, really matter. And I don't really care a lot about the others, right? But somebody put that on their plate, or it is on their plate because it came their way one way or another. And they may not have had the perspective to be like, well, that's not really critically important to the organization or to senior management. And they may not be getting that sort of help prioritization, right? I almost wish like I could take a look and desk audit everybody and be like, just do the top 5 things well. Just don't do everything else. Now, none of them feel that they can just do that because all these things feel, so important. What about the nonstop? We're sitting at our desks and Slack and email and LinkedIn and social and da. I feel like we all spend a lot of our time keeping up with stuff, and the amount of time that we actually spend, writing or like putting knowledge in our brains and like analysis and in a meeting where we're actually contributing as opposed to just, following what's going on. Is there some logic to, helping prioritize how you spend your time? A key part of that, I didn't hear that really raised. I wonder, Doug, if you've got a take on that.
Yeah, there are time management skills that I work on with clients all the time for how to reduce the distractions to yourself, and there are different things for different people. We fit it to different personal styles, but it really does come back to this notion of prioritization. So a couple points on that. One, yes, prioritization is going to start from the top down, but the people who are where the rubber hits the road also need to be able to weigh in on what is important. Two, prioritization is different for privacy and compliance professionals than it is for, say, product teams. Product teams get to go out and think of the cool new thing that's going to make money, and let's see if we convince the company that we should invest in this. And the company can decide, well, we'll make more money from this than this. Privacy and compliance teams have stuff that they need to do, some of which is just legally mandated. And it's all the unpleasant things that the company may not want to do. And so it becomes a different conversation of how the organization is going to prioritize. I think this notion of the resources, for example, I think it is obviously everybody has the experience with, if we are positioning this as we need more resources, most senior leaders don't want to have that conversation. If they're just tired of it because everybody comes to them for that. If we position it as, well, we need privacy and compliance over here versus organizational revenue over here, I don't think you're going to have much success in persuading people. And so some of the trick here is in explaining the value proposition for the work that we do of can we frame it in terms of things that are more aligned with the company's mission, in terms of efficiency, of finding economies and frugality, savings. If you're combining privacy and AI, my suspicion is that the company's getting into that because they are doing more on AI. So I think that's a real opportunity to start sifting out some of these priorities, because when you think of good strategic planning and prioritization, the important list is the things that you are not going to do anymore, and that people have permission to set aside so that we can stay focused on the main things.
Now, I'm struggling with return to office because on one hand, more people working more flexibly, more remote should have been a big reliever of some stress, right? People who are dropping off kids at school, dealing with, elderly or, relatives that need support, just being there to let in the plumber, right? Things that just stress you in the world when you have to take off or rush out early or so forth. Sitting in your comfortable shoes instead of your work gear. Those should have all made us more calm and relaxed, but it doesn't seem to. And at the same time, being part of a team and having relationships and, getting feedback from management, a lot easier to walk down the hall and say, hey, Tachana, you helped launch the public release of the great coalition of state legislators that you were working with to support around, model AI legislation. I can just drop that comment. Am I going to schedule time to have a video chat about, that informal thing? So it feels from where I sit that at least, some degree of return to office should be helpful for some audience, but we hear that people really think it's going to make their life, more miserable, and they don't want to be forced to return to work except for the days that they feel like showing up, right? So there's this whole push and pull between management. Why didn't it solve the problem? Or why isn't the right balance part of the solution? I don't know, Jordan.
It's a really hard question to answer. So I can only answer from what I've observed so far in this pandemic world, which is one, staying at home in some ways did help some aspects, but it really depends on the worker's context. If you, again, are a parent and you're staying home, maybe now you're doing two jobs at the same time if your kids are at home and you're trying to do your work simultaneously. On the other hand, it did relieve some aspects that can contribute to burnout or psychological tensions around work, such as a long commute and heavy traffic that is extremely stressful. And there's a lot of literature on how that is really detrimental to a worker's ability to fully contribute and focus while they're at work if they're dreading doing this 1 hour commute every day. Additionally, there was a lot of literature during the pandemic that neurodivergent or disabled workers were able to work more effectively when working from home. So I feel like the whole work from home, return from office is a really nuanced conversation that we need a lot of research on that is currently being done in really great ways. I can only speak personally in this case. I love being around my coworkers, but I do work remotely from distant Colorado to DC. And one of the challenges I have that would make me stay in Colorado is cost of living. Of course, it's a little bit reasonable here than it is in DC, and I can afford an overall better quality of life. In addition to my spouse being a teacher, and Colorado is a very teacher-friendly state. So there's a lot of decision-making that has to be made for individuals when considering whether or not work from home is the right fit for them. And of course, that discussion needs to be happening with the company and leadership as well, and how it may or may not contribute to burnout in the long term or the short term.
2 quick points on RTO. I don't think it's a binary thing. First, I think there are obviously benefits of bringing people into the office. There are benefits of bringing people back into the downtowns, just societal benefits. But I think some of the obligation here is on employers to create an environment where people can do their best work. That means reducing distraction, creating a pleasant place to be, et cetera. But, and as in our waning moments, I want to clarify, I really think there's a lot that we can do as individuals. When we connect with people, we can take initiative for making the small changes. We're not going to create a revolution here, but there are things that we can do to start creating a positive spiral for things. There was a nifty article in the Harvard Business Review the other day about connecting in the workplace. We connect with our colleagues, of course, but also you can connect with your leaders. You can connect with other teams. You can connect with the organization's values and culture. And all of those are places where exactly the things that I've been talking about here take place. So there are advantages from RTO, even if you have a terrible commute, where it can empower you to start bringing about the changes that can enable you to be more effective and fulfilled.
Just to quickly respond to Solange's question, strategically automating the most basic tasks. I guess obviously if there's mindless, I think it can cut both ways, right? To some degree, doing tasks that you do and you feel you got them done, can be a small sense of accomplishment. Obviously, if it's an annoying thing and it's taking you away from the most important priorities and you felt like you spend your day doing, minor things that took a lot of time that could have been automated, you obviously can be frustrated. I'm eager to see how AI does support the privacy community a bit more broadly. We're starting to see people working with tools that help do assessments and obviously subject access requests and so on and so forth. So I think the jury's still out on a lot of the work we do, how much of it can actually be smoothly automated, but hopefully it'll at least help us in a significant way. I hate making PowerPoints. I'm not, super good at it. Being able to have an LLM, even just putting in the images is frustrating to me. Where do I go get them? And I need a free clip art, or is there something we own? Isn't that, being able to say, hey, just give me a good image for each page. And so super helpful. Another comment from Ashok was break the task into smaller pieces and schedule the work. Yes, obviously a couple of those tactics to time manage and get stuff done are obviously important. I thank you all for listening in today. If you want to talk more to Doug, he's an executive coach. He does that. So you can contact him. Or if you want to talk about ad tech. And Jordan, I thank you for sharing your insights here with us as well. We obviously are day-to-day experts on things like data protection and privacy and AI, but we think the entire human is important to succeeding in those roles. And a lot of us are lawyers. Lawyers are notoriously prone to burnout and are not always good managers. Sometimes we litigate, and our goal is to fight issues, that sort of thing, and that doesn't always make a successful manager. So I think there's a lot that our community can gain to being more effective with our teams and across the organization if we think carefully about these issues. So thanks all, and thanks for joining us. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Jules.
Thank you.